From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the Jr. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. All right, Andre, it is Thursday. If you're watching us on the Gulf Coast Sports Entertainment Network, it is obviously Friday, but we have our podcast today. We're actually filming this on a Thursday, so if you're watching us on YouTube, you know, because you are watching us today on YouTube. So anyway, it is Thursday in the city. It was a little chilly out there today. What's up with this wind? It's like really windy. It's like the fourth or fifth really windy day we've had this week.
I think somebody called this a cold front, but you know, in Louisiana, a cold front just means it goes from 80 to 65. Yeah. So, you know, I'm not complaining. We both got our long sleeve shirts on, and you know, this is a fun time of the year. Weather-wise, it's not too hot yet, but also in the NFL because now we're really starting to get into draft season.
We really are going to get into draft season. The free agency is still out there, and it doesn't really go away. It just starts in mid-March, and it kind of just goes to where, you know, players are available, players are not. It is what it is, and the Saints have obviously made some moves. And but as it usually goes in the state of football, in the state of the NFL, one thing leads to another, and next up is a big one. It's the Super Bowl of the offseason. It is the NFL draft, and the mock draft season is upon us. I will have mine soon. I'm going to try to do two, one relatively soon and one right before the draft based off things that I'm hearing, but I will let you guys know when that is certainly up, and we'll probably do a podcast on that when it finally gets here. But speaking of mock drafts, a big one dropped this week. A real big one dropped this week from the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mel Kiper. And, of course, that's where we had to go with the big picture today.
Yep, when draft guru Mel Kiper drops a mock draft, everybody has to stop and look to see where he has their team going in that draft. And for the Saints, it was a little bit of a surprise pick. Mel Kiper had the Saints going with Ole Miss quarterback Jaxson Dart at number 9 overall. Saints, according to this mock draft, addressed their need at quarterback this year, not in the future. Is that a good move, Sean?
All right, let's get into it, because we did a pod on this, because it was the pod we did right when I got back from the Senior Bowl in Mobile, which was really the first time. I paid attention to Jaxson Dart, but it was the first time I really got an up close look at him, where I really paid attention to what he was doing as a draft prospect. And from what I understand, he had a pretty decent combine, didn't he? I didn't really pay too much attention to him at the combine, because the combine, just from a performance standpoint, it's awkward. But ultimately, Jaxson Dart got on everyone's radar. His name started to build. You heard all the draft gurus start talking about him. There was the clear-cut 1-2 with Ward and Sanders, or Sanders and Ward. It looks like right now it's going to be Ward and Sanders. And then what's really has solidified is Jaxson Dart is number 3 in this class. And let me just say, big picture, nothing that has happened thus far with the New Orleans Saints should scare them away from quarterback in the draft. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Even with Derek Carr returning, although, where are you, Derek? I mean, my guy still hasn't said a word about anything with his current team, with his current franchise in a really long time. Regardless, I've long said the Saints need to ultimately get what every franchise wants. Every franchise absolutely has to have for sustained success in the NFL. I always say it. They got to find the guy they can give the ball to and set this organization up for the next decade. That player, you and I agree, is not on this roster. So let me definitively say this. I want the next Saints franchise quarterback to come from the first round of the NFL draft. Yes. I want that big picture. That is what I ultimately want. I can live with the round 2 quarterback, round 2 selection, but I really, really, really want a first-round quarterback as the Saints' next franchise quarterback. I want the Saints' next franchise quarterback to come from the first round of the NFL draft. I'm done with the day 3 outliers that end up being backups that they think they might be able to develop at some point. I mean, if they want to upgrade or think they can develop someone into a decent number 2, if they want to upgrade their backup QB spot, then that's fine. But just don't tell me that's the future, all right? Because it's not. It's not. You don't draft a guy in the 5th round or the 6th round or the 3rd round thinking they're the future. If it happens, it happens, but more often than not, it does not happen. But I'm done with day 3 guys that are not drafted to be franchise guys. I'm also done with the veterans on their final stops. I'm also done with the veterans that was with an organization for a long period of time, closing out their career with the Saints. I'm done with the young veterans that are looking to revive their careers. It was just a bad situation where they flamed out in their first stop, and now they come to the Saints and going to revive their careers. I'm done with that. The Saints have tried that. They've tried everything except this. At some point, the franchise needs to invest in the quarterback in the spot where most franchise quarterbacks come from. Am I right?
Yep.
You are. Okay, thank you. The first round of the NFL draft, the one place they've been so hesitant and, in my opinion, a little scared to go and get one. They love talking about who they almost drafted
And they've
in
been
the
there.
first round. Wink, wink. Patrick Mahomes. Wink, wink. It just makes me laugh. I mean, the former Saints head coach, no coach and no organization at the time has taken or had taken more credit for almost drafting a player than that coach and from the New Orleans Saints organization at that time. But we've been down that road. I've made fun of it many a times. And don't get distracted. Let's not get distracted. The question is, first round quarterback. The Saints will at some point be in the market for a franchise quarterback. The question is, when do they pull the trigger and look in the first round of the NFL draft? And if it is this year, so be it, as long as it is not a reach and it matches where they have that QB graded. I say go with it. By the way, goes without saying, if Ward or Shador happens to slip, goes without saying, yes, jump all over it. Take them, especially at 9. Which brings us to the man of the hour, Jaxson Dart. And old Mel Kiper dropping those bombs in that latest mock draft and had the Saints taking Dart at number 9. Let's discuss, shall we? Okay, you recall I was high on Dart. By the way, what is your honest opinion on Dart as a player?
I think that he is good. I think he has the tools, but I think drafting him at 9 is a reach.
Okay.
I don't view him as a franchise quarterback. I view him as somebody who can maybe develop into a solid starter in the league, but you don't look to draft a solid starter in round 1. You don't look to draft a Brock Purdy in Brock 1 or a Dak Prescott. You look to find a Joe Burrow. You look to find a Patrick Mahomes. You look to find a Josh Allen, and I don't think Jaxson Dart is that.
I think he has plus attributes in all categories. I think he has plus accuracy, plus arm strength, plus athleticism, plus intangibles, plus deep ball, or plus field vision. How high is he in each one of those categories if you're scoring at 1 through 10? I don't know where he tops out at a 9 anywhere. So that to me has always been sort of the feeling of Jaxson Dart. Is it a high ceiling or a high floor guy? But I was high on him after the Senior Bowl because it was clear he was the best quarterback there. We potted about that. You recall we correctly predicted he would rise in this draft, and he certainly has. You recall that I loved him as a second rounder. Loved him as a second rounder. But 9 was too high. Then the top draft guru in the game, Mel Kiper, comes around, and the guy who basically invented the profession and has Dart to the Saints at 9. So now, how do I feel? Let me just say, Dart is good. Dart can play. But I just can't go there. I just can't go there with you, Mel Kiper. You're on your own with this one. 9 is just too high. That would be reaching. That would be reaching. I agree with you. I think Dart is a good player. I think he can be a consistent, solid starter in the NFL. In fact, I think Dart is better. This is not hindsight. This is, if you just compare the college resumes, I think he's better than Kenny Pickett when he was coming out. I think he's better than Will Levis when he was coming out. I think he's better than Anthony Richardson when he was coming out a couple years ago. I think the guy can start in this league, and given his experience in college, maybe quicker than people want to admit. And I wanted some confirmation on this feeling. He was going to rise, and he was a first rounder, or he was going to be a guy that was going to go and, sort of be a good player, land in the first round, but maybe not necessarily 9 being too high. I mean, it is Kiper, the godfather, as we said, the GOAT. So I did some looking, looked at 7 reputable mock drafts, their latest version, which obviously you want to check the latest version because it always changes. None of them had Dart as high as old Mel Kiper. The majority did have him as a first rounder. I think that's you're starting to see the stock rising. 5 of the 7 mock drafts had Dart in the first round. Kiper at 9, and guess where else? All four, Daniel Jeremiah, Athlon Sports, Field Yates, and a CBS mock draft, all four didn't just have him in the first round. They all had him going 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Two of them had him going in the second round.
I can see that.
I don't think Dart is making it to the second round, guys. I really don't. I think it would be great if he did, because then all bets would be off. You can trade up to whatever you got to do to go get him, which is where I love the value. But there is a scenario.
Okay.
Where I would consider Jaxson Dart in the first round, and it is this. What if at 9, the Saints get a call and they trade back to 16 with Arizona or 17 with Cincinnati, snatch an additional second-round pick, or maybe a future first-round pick at 47 or 49. Grab Dart at 17 and still have 6 more selections in the top 131 picks. I wouldn't mind that at all. I would be okay with that, because that would be a slight overdraft of Dart, in my opinion, but it would be for a starting quarterback, and I believe Dart can be truly that. But 16 or 17 or 15 or 20 or 24, that's fine. But 9 is way too high. And, of course, there's the other option. Not as big on this one, but it is a possibility. You stay at 9. You take your Jalen Walker. You take your Ty Warren. You take your Ashton Gentry. You take your Ted McMillan, whoever has the value at the 9th overall pick. Then you take your second-round pick. Then you try to move back in somewhere in the 20s of the first round. You know, package the second-round pick, or perhaps maybe your next year's first-round pick to get back into the back of the first round, say 22, 23, 24, similar to what they did in 2011 when they drafted Cam Jordan. They jumped back in a few picks later, got Mark Ingram. They had to forfeit the 2012 first-round pick to get back in with that first-rounder with New England. I wouldn't love that selection, or I wouldn't love that path, but that is also an option. But to me, if you stay at 9, the pick cannot be Jaxson Dart. What say you?
Number one, you can't give up next year's first. Yet
There
next
you go.
year's first is gold. The way this roster and this team looks,
I agree.
I'm not giving anybody's next year first, because that could be pick 1 overall, maybe.
Exactly.
But, when it comes to Jaxson Dart, I have a question for the people who would like Jaxson Dart to be on this football team. Do you want to draft Jaxson Dart because you think he's an elite prospect and he's a quarterback that can, take the Saints to new heights? Or do you want him because he's going to be there and the Saints need a quarterback? And it feels like it's the latter for a lot of people who are leaning Jaxson Dart. Oh, the Saints need a quarterback. Here's a quarterback that's going to be available. Let's take him. Well, Sean, just because you're single doesn't mean you walk in a bar and you wipe up the first thing you see, right? I might be single. I might be a little lonely, but if I walk in the bar and wipe up the first woman I see, I might get lucky. She might change my life. More likely, she might ruin my life. And that's what picking the wrong quarterback in the first round can do for an NFL team. We have seen so many teams that were going right take a hard left turn because they drafted the wrong guy. And when you draft the wrong guy, that sets you back years. And this is a franchise that's already been set back years thanks to this whole salary cap situation and kicking the can down the road as they have. I don't think this is a team that can afford to draft the wrong guy. So just like if you're lonely and you're going to a bar, instead of wiping up the first thing you see, work on yourself. Work on yourself so when the right thing comes, you are ready to be in that relationship. And I think that's something similar to what the Saints should do. Right now, instead of reaching for a quarterback that may not be the star face of the franchise that you need, I think you're better off working on yourself and setting the table for that quarterback to eventually arrive. If you want an example, there was one last year in a playoff team in the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels didn't just show up in Washington and turn life around overnight. That's a consistent rebuild that has been happening for a while. Jaden Daniels was able to turn around the Commanders because he is very talented, but he had a reliable run game in Brian Robinson. They brought in Austin Eckler to help offset that run game as well. He had a top 10 receiver in Terry McLaurin. He had a reliable, consistent tight end in Zach Ertz. He had a good defense on the other side of the ball because they invested a lot of picks in that defense. And that all culminated into one big pot that was the Washington Commanders that eventually took them to the playoffs when you draft the right guy. I think the Commanders did a good job setting the table for Jaden. I think now is the time that the Saints should be setting the table for the guy they will eventually draft maybe next year. Because we've talked about it on offense. Your offensive line, I mean, it's not elite by any means. I think it got better from last year, but the offensive line could still use some improving. You're going to have to find an answer at running back because Alvin Kamara is 30 and not getting any younger. And at wide receiver, we have talked at length about the lack of playmakers on this team. Now is the time I think you should look for an Ashton Jeanty in the first round. You should look for a guy who Cam Jordan has been heavily campaigning for on social media, and Ted McMillan. You know, this is the time to set that table. So instead of reaching for a quarterback, when the right time comes, you can take him, and I think the right time would be next year in comparison to this year.
What about if they traded back?
I'm still not a fan of I think it's just how I view Jaxson Dart. Even if you trade back to 16, I still think that, like I said earlier, Jaxson Dart is a solid starter in the NFL. You don't want to pick a side. No team is setting out in the first round drafting a quarterback thinking, I hope he can be a solid starter. I need this guy to be a star.
See, here is where I would 99% of the time agree with you, but here's where I had to pivot a little bit. There's no guarantee the Saints are going to have a pick this high or a chance at something like this for a while. There's no guarantee they're going to finish work. In fact, I think they're going to finish either as bad or maybe a little bit better next year. So are you in position to strike next year? And here's the other thing. You used that analogy of you don't wife up the first one. Well, it's been 1971 since they last drafted a first-round quarterback. Some would say the Saints have a little bit of a commitment issue right now. If that's the case, 1971. And I've said I think they've been a little gun-shy when it comes to this, and I think this started way before the current predicament that they're in. I think this started, frankly, when Drew was here, when they had multiple opportunities to at least kick the tires or at least have a chance to, because they had deep enough rosters at that time to where they could have the future plan in place. I thought it was the biggest flaw of the previous regime. So I hear what you're saying. You don't just jump because of the options there, but at the same time, you can't be afraid because it's not the sexiest pick as quarterback. It's not the short thing like Cam Ward is right now. You got to trust your grades, trust your process. I haven't talked to anyone with the Saints to know where he lands on their draft board, and their draft board's probably not done yet. But I find it very, very, very hard to believe that he would be in the top 10 or even 15 of prospects, regardless of position. But if somehow you were able to finagle it, where you're sitting there in the mid-teens, low 20s, and that grade is in the vicinity of where Jaxson Dart comes up, and you truly think, that's the other thing, do you think this guy can be a franchise player? Then I would have no problem with the Saints pull the trigger on him. I like the player. I think he sees the middle of the field incredibly well. I think he was certainly benefited from a very good system, maybe the best play caller, offensive play caller, and really not just play caller, play designer in college football. And Lane Kiffin really took advantage of that. It felt like for up until this year, there was a little bit of a kind of I don't say love-hate, but it kind of felt like Lane wasn't always all in on Jaxson Dart until last year, where he really, because they put a lot of guys in to kind of compete with him, and Jaxson Dart kind of fought him off every step of the way. He's played a lot of college football, so look again. It's all about where you target Jaxson Dart. I like him as a player. I just don't like him in the top 10. We're in agreement. If you can somehow finagle a situation or manipulate a situation where you have a chance to pick the guy and it's mid-first round back, I say don't hesitate.
But think about that. I always say around draft time, if that's your guy, you get your guy.
Yeah, right.
If your guy is, if you as the Saints think Jaxson Dart is your guy,
then take him at 9.
Then that's my thing.
Okay.
Why would I trade back hoping I get Jaxson Dart?
Yeah, you're right.
And fall into Jaxson Dart? Because if Jaxson Dart is my guy and I'm Kellen Moore and I'm sold, hey, I've seen this kid, I can work with this kid. I want him. You're taking him at 9, and you don't care who says you reach, because the Atlanta Falcons last year said
you're right.
Michael Penix is my guy.
Wasn't that at 9?
And they picked him at 8.
At 8, okay.
And they picked Michael Penix, and some said that was a reach because Michael Penix was getting mocked late first, sometimes second round. But the Falcons said, that's the guy we want. We're picking him now. So if Jaxson Dart is your guy, you don't got to trade back. You could take him at 9.
You could absolutely do that. And
I wouldn't.
And if,
you wouldn't, but hey.
And if they did, we would know their conviction on it because we know that I think most people have a general idea that they're in the general neighborhood as us, where he's probably a mid to late first round quarterback. So, but if they love him, they love him. And look, Kellen Moore's got to get his guy. He's not doing anything unless he gets his guy at the quarterback position. That's it. He's not. Yeah. No head coach is going anywhere until they get their guy at quarterback. No. So that's where we're at with the Jaxson Dart situation. Thank you, Mel Kiper, for the pod topic today, because we felt like it was something we almost went with yesterday, but the Saints salary cap thing kind of popped up, but we went with it today, and I think it was a pretty good discussion. Let us know your comments.
Now, we're talking about the top three. We've touched a lot on Jaxson Dart. We mentioned Cam Ward. We mentioned Shedeur Sanders. But, Sean, what if the Saints were to look outside the top three, past those three quarterbacks, and look at maybe the Dylan Gabriels, the Quinn Ewers, the Jalen Milrose, the Will Howards of this draft? Of the guys outside of the top three, which one do you think fits the Saints the best, potentially?
Well, there is a list of guys. If you go outside of Dart, you have the guy that's probably that I had no real knowledge of, that's really popped when you talk to a lot of these guys that grind tape, that do a lot of film study. It's Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. He's really risen. There's Quinn Ewers. There's Jalen Milroe. You said Dylan Gabriel. But for me, the guy I like, and this is easily a day 3 prospect. This is one of those where maybe he's a better fit for you as a true backup. Do you think he can operate your offense? I don't think this guy's got franchise or starter potential, but I think he may be a solid backup in the NFL. It's Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. Didn't like him at Ohio State.
Did not either. I was up there at the time.
But I really do like him at Syracuse. In fact, I saw the game against Miami, and I'm like, man, this guy is dealing right now. He outplayed Cam Ward that game. And Syracuse, from a talent standpoint, they've gotten better. But I don't, NIL sort of leveled the playing field all the way around. But I think he was the guy that I didn't really have any sort of feeling about, because when he left Ohio State, I just felt like, okay, Ohio State doesn't think he's good enough anymore. And I guess they were technically proven right because Will Howard got him there. But he goes to Syracuse and really lights it up. I think he's got a good arm. He's a good decision maker. He plays with anticipation and timing, which, regardless of what kind of offense you have in the NFL, you need those two traits to succeed in the NFL. So, of the best of the rest, that would be the best fits, in my opinion, I might go Kyle McCord from Syracuse.
If you're standing up listening to this podcast, you may want to sit down.
Oh, okay.
If you're driving, you might want to swerve into a parking lot or something, because I don't know if many people will like this one. My guy is Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe from Alabama, because we've both talked about it, and we agree we're both tired of seeing the Saints take mid-round quarterbacks and try to kick the tires and see if they can, because more times than not, they can't. But Jalen Milroe's different. He ran a 4.3 at Alabama's Pro Day. This man is an unparalleled athlete when you look at the quarterback position in the NCAA. He compares in a few ways to Jalen Hurts, the quarterback that Kellen Moore just left after making him a Super Bowl champion. He may have the lowest floor of all of the guys that you would talk about outside of the top three, but I think he's got the highest ceiling. He's something different. If you're going to pick a mid-round quarterback, I'm tired of seeing the Garrett Graysons, the Jake Hayners, the Spencer Rattlers, the guys who fit that specific mold. This is a guy that's completely different. This is a guy, he's not a great passer right now. He's got a lot to learn when it comes to anticipation, throwing the ball, yada, yada, yada. But a guy you pick in the mid-round, you're not expecting to start day one. If you can get him with Kellen Moore, you can develop him. Jalen Milroe is a guy that can do things that nobody else in this draft class can. His ceiling and potential is sky high if the right coach can pull it out of him. Now, obviously, I wouldn't pick him high. I wouldn't pick him probably above the 3rd or 4th round. But if you're just like they were 5th round, and we talked last year, Spencer Rattler was way up on their board. They love Spencer Rattler. You get to the 5th round, you pick Spencer Rattler. If you're in the middle of the draft and Jalen Milroe still sitting there, it might be worth saying, let's see what he's got.
He scared me to death at the Senior Bowl when I watched
that was ugly
one-on-ones, and he misfired on his first 11 passes. And then I heard he got better as the week went on, which is certainly a good thing. He's got the 4.3 speed. 4.37, is that what it was?
Yeah.
4.37. I wouldn't have a problem as maybe he's a guy that you like get him on the field as sort of a wildcat package to start.
Yeah.
And then maybe at some point he could develop. But man, there's a long way to go with him in the passing game, a long way. And that showed up on the college tape, not just at the Senior Bowl. But there's a long way to go in terms of seeing the middle of the field, in terms of timing and anticipation. And you just can't always rely on the 4.37 speed when it comes to certain situations in the NFL with the way the field is. You know, the hash marks are different. There's just not as much spacing when it comes to the NFL. And then you've got to be able to operate in certain situations. It's,
Yeah.
you know, like Anthony Richardson right now is obviously struggling with that right now. Yeah. But that would be interesting. I mean, what round are you talking about? Maybe 4th round, 5th round, something like that?
4th round, 5th round. And just like I said with Spencer Rattler, you're not drafting Spencer Rattler to be the face of your franchise. You're drafting him to see if he can play.
I wouldn't have a problem with
Milroe for that. You're seeing if he can play.
Yeah, and as a value pick, you may obviously wouldn't play right away, but I think you can get him on the field, you know, a little bit of a Taysom type role. Well, we'll see. Maybe. I wouldn't have. I mean, look.
I think he could beat out Rattler.
There's certainly a lot of speculation. I mean, there's going to be a lot of speculation right now in terms of which way the Saints could go. Speaking of, you saw our favorite backup quarterback where he signed?
Oh, where'd he go?
Cooper Rush went to the Ravens.
Oh,
how about that? You talk about out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, that's a totally different offense if Lamar ever got hurt.
Right, and which is crazy because we saw Tyler Huntley out in Baltimore become a Pro Bowler backing up Lamar Jackson and stepping in, but he's got a similar skill set like Lamar. Yeah. Cooper Rush, unless he's faster than we've seen, does not.
And you got to do a whole different offense with Cooper Rush, and I love Cooper Rush.
Maybe he's an underrated athlete. Sneaky athleticism.
Sneaky athleticism. Our favorite term out here at Fox 8. All right, we got to get out of here. We got about 8 seconds left. Okay, cool. For Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.